And we are live. Good evening, Africa, wherever you are joining us from. If you are in Ghana, I say Akwaba. If you are in Lagos, I say welcome. If you are in Rwanda joining us, I say thank you for joining us. For those in Nairobi, I say Asante. Those in Mombasa, Asante. Thank you for joining us this evening on another session of the BNB Chain Web3 Mastery class. A couple of ground rules before we get into the session today. Please note that this is a live session. That means you can actually interact with me in real time and ask questions. So during the course of the session, whatever questions that you have watching on YouTube, you can add it to the comment section and I'll be able to respond to it in real time. So having said that, we will be going straight into today's class with a brief overview of where we stopped last week and then go straight into sharing the things that we are meant to learn today. I'm going to introduce myself again for those who do not know me. My name is Emmanuel Owahina. Here at BNB Chain, I work as the developer community lead for the African region. So for those living on the continent, that basically means that you are going to be interacting with me as the BNB Chain member of the team here in Africa. And I do hope that the opportunity comes that we get to meet because I might just be in a city near you during the course of running activities for the rest of the year. And before getting into today's course, I'd like to mention that I'll be taking today's class because here at BNB Chain, we are very heavy on education and innovation. And then the motive for the Web3 Mastery with BNB Chain is to take our developers through a series of learning. And then when I say developer, it does not necessarily mean those who are at expert level or those who are already skilled, right? You could be an enthusiast, you could be a beginner, and this is your first time getting involved with blockchain technologies. The idea is to like train you, give you the requisite knowledge that you can use to start building immediately on BNB chain. Even if you're coming from a Web2 background and you want to get into writing your first set of contracts, or you want to start interacting with the BNB chain API, the Web3 mastery course, it's the right fit for you. So it's a 6 weeks masterclass that we turn you to a Web3 master, hopefully. And then this is our second week in the program, also referenced to as day 2. And we are going to be having a 6 weeks program, right? Week 1, which was last week, we had the pleasure of having an amazing guest with us in the person of Busayo, where we talked about blockchain and consensus mechanisms. So this is week 2, and today it's my pleasure to be your instructor. So we are going to be talking about how to get started with the BNB chain docs. And then in week 3, I'm going to walk through setting up a development environment where you can get to write smart contracts, right? It's going to be an introductory course where you get to understand the tools that you need to write smart contracts and you get to write your first Hello World contract. And then in week 4, you're going to write a full-fledged contract and then learn many things about blockchain technology, from understanding how events are emitted on chain to understanding how you can log these events, and then all of the various activities that you can do interacting with the blockchain. So in week 5, you are going to build and deploy your first dApp on the BNB chain. So like I said, here at BNB, we are very, very heavy on education and innovation. And I'm going to take some time to speak to education and innovation. So for us, the plan is to educate and educate and educate and make sure that we have enough developers across the continent learning about blockchain technology, especially the BNB chain infrastructure. And then getting to a point where they start innovating. That means building their projects on top of BNB chain already existing infrastructure. So education and innovation. And then in week 6, we are going to be talking about the importance of security, and we'll explore Darby. Darby, it's a BNB ecosystem of applications built on her infra, and we are going to be looking at a couple of projects there, and then working and hopefully with the mindset that at some point your project is also going to be featured on Darby. So before we get into today's session, which the topic is getting started with the BNB chain docs, we are quickly going to do a review of last week's session. So last week, it was an introductory course to blockchain technology, right? Where we talked about blockchains and consensus mechanisms. And during the course of that talk, we ran through a couple of slides where Busayo shared different concepts regarding blockchain. She spoke about the history of blockchain, how it was started, and then spoke to us about consensus mechanisms, and also talked about the characteristics of a blockchain, right? So the approach for this session is such that we want everybody to feel involved, both learners and those who already know about blockchain technology. So it goes without saying that it doesn't do any harm to review what was learned last week, right? So typically, the characteristics of a blockchain, why the blockchain technology is important, it's because of its ability to handle sentiments quickly, right? It's decentralized nature, meaning that there is no central ownership of the information stored, right? And then its immutability. So, and given the fact that it is also very, very highly secured and it is based on consensus, right? So, consensus, in very simple terms, meaning agreements reached by all parties involved in using the blockchain. So we talked about the varying types of blockchain networks, from public blockchain networks to private blockchain networks to permission blockchain networks and to consortium blockchain networks. And of course, here at BNB Chain, our blockchain infrastructure, it's actually a public blockchain network. So we looked into the definition of consensus mechanisms, and then we actually spent a lot of time on that session talking about the varying types of consensus mechanisms, right? Here we looked at the proof of work consensus, the proof of stake consensus, the delegated proof of stake, and the proof of stake capacity, right? The proof of a lifestyle and the proof of bond. So these are varying ways that participants in the blockchain can come together and reach an agreement on how to reach a settlement on balancing the books of the ledger, right? Because essentially the blockchain is a distributed ledger. So here at BNB Chain, we rely on the consensus mechanism commonly referred to as a proof of stake consensus mechanism. So that is our review of last week's activities. And so it begins. Today's session, we are going to be starting with two, where we'll be talking about the BNB chain docs. So just before we go into the session, I had like to know where everybody watching this stream is joining us from. So if it's not much of an ask, kindly drop in the comments your country, your city, and where you are joining us from in this session. I can see a couple of people from our Telegram community. And if you have not joined our Telegram community for developers, this is an opportunity to join our Telegram community because, like I said, we are heavy on education and innovation programs. So during the course of the year, we are going to be running activities that are education based, and this is one of such initiatives, the Web3 Mastery course. And also, we are going to be running other activities over the course of the year that will grant an opportunity to people who run through this program to participate in those campaigns, such as hackathons and all of those. Oh, we have a lot of folks joining us from Nigeria. This is really amazing. And I'm really looking forward to meeting a whole lot of the folks in here. Um, Ifeanyi from Port Harcourt, Chinedu from Ilorin, um, Daniel from Togo. It's a pleasure to have you guys here. Victory from Lagos, Favorite, a whole lot of folks from Nigeria, and oh, all the way up in Sokoto, Andrew. That is way, way, way up northern Nigeria. Thank you guys so much for joining us this evening. And yes, Favorites joining us from Nigeria as well. So back into the session, getting started with the BNB chain docs. So today I am going to walk you through four parts of this session. Oh, okay, more Nigerians joining us. Thank you guys so much for making it here this evening. It's a pleasure and it's a delight. So, like I did mention, just to quickly run through for those just joining us, this is the Web3 Mastery course. And the Web3 Mastery course is a 6 weeks course where we'll be able to take you from beginner to becoming a Web3 master, right? That is practically the idea. So, and we'll do that by using different instructors on different days. Last week we had a different instructor. So this is the session that I am taking today, and I am the instructor for today. So it is truly my delight to be speaking with you. A whole lot of folks from Lagos, a whole lot of folks from Lagos. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It's really a delight to have you all here. It seems like my Nigerian folks are cheering me on. So yes, um, this week we will be getting started with BNB Chain. So we are going to be looking at five different things today, right? In like the general sense of it. But in the granular sense, we are going to be going deeper into each of these concepts and then sharing more. So I'll walk you through the history of the EVM ecosystem with a specific focus on when we started BNB chain as a blockchain infrastructure. And then I am going to introduce you into our different infra products right now. And sorry, when I say infra, I actually mean infrastructure. So we have the BNB Smart Chain, we have the BNB Beacon Chain, we have the BNB Green Feed, and then I am going to walk you through the BNB chain documentation, right? The simple idea is to show you that everything that you need to start building out with BNB chain, it's available into our in our documentation, and you can pick any and then get to work immediately. So moving on, the BNB chain, also known as it's composed basically of two blockchains, right? We have the BNB Beacon chain, and then we also have the BNB Smart Chain. So just for context, these are not two EVM separate entities, right? The BNB chain, it's the blockchain components of the BNB ecosystem, and it is EVM compatible, right? What that means in very simple terms is that it is a fork of Ethereum, and it uses the same settlement infrastructure that, or methodologies, if you wish, that Ethereum relies upon, right? And that is the proof of stake methodology, which we are going to be talking about. Then the Beacon chain, it's the infrastructure that is responsible for the governance of the BNB chain, right? This is where settlements are reached between all the players that are actively involved in the BNB chain ecosystem. So quickly moving on, we also have a ZK version of BNB. That's a zero knowledge rollup, right? It is practically it practically exists to aids developers build large scale BNB chain apps, right, with a higher throughput and much lower transactions fees than you will get on BNB chain. And already, as it is, our transactions fees are actually as low as it gets, right? So I am trying to make sure that I do not speak too fast while I am reviewing your comments and at the same time moving through the slides. So moving on, just to reiterate what I just shared, that was the four infra layers of BNB chain, right? We have the BNB Beacon chain. We have the BNB Smart Chain, commonly also referred to as the BSC. Then we have the ZK BNB, and then we have the ZK BNB. Oh, okay. Soccer Focus is asking if there's network issues. No, it is actually very, very stable on here. Possibly you should look at your internet. And then we also have BNB Chain Greenfield, right? And then just to progress on our session, the next thing that we are going to be talking about is the various components of the BNB chain itself. That is the BNB testnet and then the BSC mainnet, right? And also, I'm going to explain to you what is a validator on the BNB chain and how you can become one, and then what is staking and the Bitcoin chain, right? So for those who are here to interact with the blockchain ecosystem, or you already do, so typically we have what we call testnets and then what we call mainnets, right? The testnets of a blockchain are those that infrastructure layer where before developers can deploy smart contracts code that they have written to execute business logic, they can deploy it on the testnet and then get to perform transactions just to make sure that without real world currency, just to make sure that they did not incur any loss or they have not shipped any box with the code, with the smart contract code that they have written. So that is why testnet exists, right? And all transactions or mainnets, you can describe them as pseudo transactions because they are not real world transactions. They are just simulations of what can happen on real world transactions. And then mainnets are as that layer of the blockchain, right, where transactions happen and people actually use real real tokens with values to be able to exchange value, right? And typically the way that process works is that fiat is converted to tokens, and then that tokens is used to either interact with the smart contract or use in services such as payments, right? And like I did mention during the recap of last week's session, here at BNB Chain, we rely on the proof of stake authority, where we have a limited number of validators that have staked their tokens, and then as a result of having their token stake, they have authority over the network, and they can either make sure that a block gets to pass or not, right? So this is actually a walkthrough through our documentation. And then to get more information on validators, a simple visit to our docs will land you on that page where you can learn all about our validators, right? So typically, there are incentives to becoming a validator, right? Because as a result of the transaction fees that users pay to be able to carry out fees, validators can be able to like earn a fraction from that transaction fees, right? And to be able to become a validator has to like stake a certain amount of tokens that would give them the ability to now operate in the Beacon chain, right? Because the Beacon chain is the infrastructure layer where governance activities happen that influence the behavior and characteristics of the BSC mainnet. So that is what staking is, and then what the Bitcoin chain is, right? And then I am just going to be introducing you to certain terms just to give you an underlying foundation of what we mean when we talk about the differences between the Bitcoin chain and then the BNB smart chain itself. So the BNB smart chain, right? And then a cursory look at explaining some of the critical terms that we need to learn about blockchain will give us an even better overview on what it is that the BNB chain is, right? So typically, the first question that anyone would have is, what does a block look like in a blockchain? So this is the section where I am going to introduce you to our own Explorer, where I can walk you through the details of what happens that constitutes transactions being batched into what we call blocks, right? But aside that explanation, it is important to give a little background on how the BNB chain came into existence, right? So, and then if you were here last week, you would gain insight into what it is I'm trying to communicate when I mention the Ethereum virtual machine, which is the EVM. So typically, the EVM sits on decentralized hardware. So without using too many bogus terms, what that means is that you have different computers at different locations on the globe, right? And all of these computers run one software together at the same time that contains a ledger where balances happen. But as the transactions that happen on the Ethereum virtual machines are very, very expensive, right? As a result of people having to pay gas to be able to have their transactions be added into blocks. Again, I'm going to come back to explaining what blocks are. And as a result of the high gas fees for Ethereum, the Bitcoin chain was launched in 2017, right? And then the BNB smart chain was launched in 2020. So, and typically, what that now means is that transactions fees are easier for people that use the BNB chain to send transactions or to interact with contracts. So it is far cheaper to use BNB chain to send one token from one address to another as against using some other blockchain system. And all of this data is immutable. All of this was explained last week. I am going to add the video in the comments so that for those who were not here, you would be able to see it. So also I explained consensus. I think an easy way to have a grasp of consensus it's when you have a, a mental picture of an agreement, right? Where you have a mental picture of, say, four people who have access to a piece of data, right? And then have to now look at that data and then come to terms that okay, this data exists and it is either one or two, right? And everybody checks the record that they have and then they all come into agreement. So that is basically an easier way to explain what consensus are. So typically to operate on a blockchain network, you need to have a smart contract, right? And a smart contract is also referred to as a decentralized application or a business logic code containing business logic that enables different participants to exchange value back and forth. And then, like I did mention, we are going to take a look at the BNB Chain Explorer. Here, I would explain to you what blocks are and how blocks are created. So this is the BNB Chain Explorer. And I'm just going to zoom in so that it is more visible to everyone. Too much zoom there. Then go back to this, right? So this is bscscan.com. It is an explorer where you can review all activities that are happening on the BNB chain infrastructure, right? And then this is the landing page where you immediately see all blocks and see your transactions. So this being a real-time demo, we are going to like view all the blocks and get to understand what is happening here. So each of the blocks has a number, and you will notice that these numbers are sequential, right? That means you have 16, 17, 18, and right now we are 22. And then you would see that all of these blocks, the key term to use to explaining the activity, the action that happens here, it's called mining. All of these blocks have been mined, and you can see from block 5, which was a minute ago, then up to like 10 seconds ago, we have mined, that should be about 17 blocks, right? 17 blocks under a minute. So that's technically, say, about one block every 3 seconds. And then that is the number of transactions that are in each block. So what that implies is that in block 21, there were 183 transactions that went through, right? And this is the reward for the validators that bash the number of transactions. So on the blockchain, you have people sending their individual transactions to and fro, right? Let's take a look at block 19. So you have individuals sending transactions to and fro. It contains 109 transactions. So you can take a look at each of these transactions and see what happened. This is a deposit transaction. This is a register transaction, a transfer transaction, right? Or a claim transactions. These were all transactions that happened on the BNB chain, right? About a minute ago. So, and all of this data, right, when they are being sent, are bashed into what we call blocks. And then these blocks are now bashed sequentially. So this is what we mean when we say the blockchain is immutable, because you can go back through the history of any of these block, any of these informations, and then still find the information for each particular block, right? And just be able to like reference it, right? So moving on away from this, moving on away from this, the next thing that we are going to be talking about would be to quickly do a very, very quick demo, right? For those who, I am just going to add this to the comments on here. This is a video that you can watch possibly at your spare time after the end of this session, right? Where it walks you through how a blockchain actually works, right? I recommend it because for me, as at the time that I didn't even I can't remember how old the video is, but I do remember that I came across it during one of my learning sessions where typically I have this routine where after some time of having learned something, I go back again just to go over the basics, just to simply get an understanding and then get to see what I may have missed or just to like typically fill my knowledge gaps. So I recommend that video and then drop it there as a reference for anyone to go through. So we've talked about blocks and how transactions are bashed and then added into blocks, and then how you can monitor all of the information on the BNB chain infrastructure. So please note, all of these things I'm sharing are actually steps into what we are building, right? Because before you get to the point where you even start writing smart contracts or interacting with our API, you have to first of all have a sense of what is happening on the BNB chain ecosystem, right? So you can not just want to understand this data without first knowing how all of this data is produced, right? So typically, all of these are foundational knowledge for when we get into the technical heavy stuff first on this call, and also into everything else that we'll be sharing during the course of these sessions. So we are going to be talking about Block Explorer and Wallet in this session. We took a look at the BSA Block Explorer, right? How blocks look like, and practically just an overview of smart contracts. So what we are going to be doing during the course of this session is to carry out a very simple demo transaction, right? And in that transaction, I am going to show on the blockchain how data moves from one point to another and how you can monitor it in the BNB chain ecosystem, right? And practically, this session assumes that a lot of our learners have MetaMask stored, and you may have interacted with the blockchain at one point or the other. But if you have not, one of the tools that you need to be able to like interact with the blockchain, it's the MetaMask application, right? It is like the simplest go-to resource that you can install and start using immediately. And you can install it as a plugin on Chrome and create what we call an address. So we are quickly going through. I'm going to walk you through the BNB chain faucet where you can go and then get tokens when you have an address, right? So where you can go get tokens and then be able to like use those tokens for text transactions. I did mention at the beginning of this session, not necessarily at the beginning, but during the course of speaking, that we have what we call the test nets and the main nets, right? Test nets are where you get tokens to interact with the blockchain, and then you will be able to like carry out transactions without losing any money. So when you get your address for MetaMask, this is the BNB Smart Chain faucet where you can come, paste that address, and then you'll be able to get zero point 0.5 in tokens. So this is my MetaMask. As you can see, I already have zero point 0.5 tokens in there, right? And then I can copy this address, take it to the faucet, right? Just to demonstrate to you that this is a newly created address, and then we'll be carrying out our first transaction using this address. So the only transactions that has happened here, it's just me going to the faucet and having zero point 0.5 BNB allotted to me. And please note, when you use the faucet, you would have to wait another 24 hours to be able to get new test BNB tokens. And please, this is not real world tokens. It is just for illustration purposes. So we are going to go back to my MetaMask where I am going to demo a simple transaction, right? Where I am going to send tokens from this address to another address. But what is important here is that I want to using the using the test net, right? Because this is the Explorer. Using the Explorer, I want to like demo what happens when the tokens move from one point to another and how you can capture that information to build out applications. So this is me giving insight into something that you are going to be learning down the line, but it's important to understand how these transactions operate, right? Because once you understand how transactions go from one point to another, you can take that knowledge and then be able to extrapolate it into any other thing, right? Once you understand that this is what happens when I click this button, right? It gives you a mental picture that you can rely upon, that you can use when you are either building out user interfaces to interact with our APIs here at BNB Chain, or when you are writing smart contracts that you have deployed, and then you get to understand how interactions go from one point to another. So back to our MetaMask, I am just going to carry out one transaction, and please note, please note that this is still just one transaction here, right? And then MetaMask again, I have zero point 0.5 test BNB. I am just going to click on send, impute an address. Hold on, do I have the right address? No, I do not have the right address. I want to send to a different address. So I am going to impute a different address. Yes. So let us send 0. Let's say 0.9. Yes, test BNB, right? So it's going to cost us 0.21 TNB test BNB to carry out this transaction. So it is from this is what we call this gas fee. That is where this is typically the transaction fees, right? This is where the payment for the validators come out from. So the validators ensure that the transactions on the blockchain, right, are not malicious, right? And then they also provide, if you will, some sort of backup for the transactions that go through, right? Plus also providing the infra that is used to set up more decentralized nodes. So the moment I click next, I am going to like have to verify this transaction. And then I am going to confirm that I want this transaction to be added to a pool of transactions on the blockchain. And then where a validator is going to batch that transaction into a block and then be able to approve it. So we can go look at this on the Explorer, right? And then you will see that it has been successful. So we can actually view my information. You see the amount of gas that was used by the particular transactions, which is like part of the fees that the validator is going to take. And more than anything else, you see the block where it was verified at. So if you remember very well, I think we were at block 22. That means between then and now, we have actually had 12 blocks that have passed. So we can look at this block, which is still being confirmed. It has not been validated yet and added to the number of blocks on chain, right? And then you see that it just has 14 transactions that are happening. So we can go to the main BSC scan and then quickly go back to the block where our block is being verified. So the block number is 5332. So we go to BSC scan and then we would have to like scroll to find that particular block where our transaction is being bashed. So let me show you 100 records. Um, so our transaction is being bashed in here, right? You can see that there are 14 transactions going on in there. And then these are different other blocks that various validators are batching transactions into to make sure that they are the first to validate this information and then having all of that added to particular blocks. So why is all of this information important? Like I said, it is critical to learning, it is very critical to learning how the infrastructure works because that way you can be able to build applications on top of the infrastructure. So this is the particular page that we are looking at earlier. And you can see that now, as against the one transaction that we had there before, we now have two transactions, right? With the first one being when this particular address received tokens, and the second transaction being when tokens left the address, which was about 2 minutes ago. So for a developer who is building a user interface using a set of APIs that you are going to be looking at later, you can typically build out a dashboard using our APIs where you are able to like show more information regarding what happened when one token was transferred from one point to another, right? And then each of these transactions have different information based off on the suite of APIs, which we are going to introduce you to during the course of Web3 mastery. So, having spoken this much, I do hope that you have been listening and then you have received enough information that would make you have questions, right? So this is still Web3 mastery, and then we are not done with this session. I just wanted to like take a breather, take a break, come to you and tell you that please, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, just if you have anything to share, or just leave them in the comment section. And yes, I am taking a look at the comment section, and I am going to be answering your questions. So get to the end of today's session, remember that I said that today we are going to share about the BNB Beacon chain, the BNB Smart Chain, the governance, and then also BNB Greenfield. So I told you that the BNB chain is the governance layer for the BNB smart chain. And the BNB smart chain is the EVM layer where transactions take place, right? And then the BNB governance is what we are going to be looking at now. And then we'll close out by looking at the BNB Greenfield, and then I'll walk you through our documentation for a bit. So practically, what is governance, right? So this is not governance in terms of how nations are governed, but it's about the same idea, right? It's simply a process where participants within a framework come together and decide on the set of rules and instruction that they collectively will all follow, right? And governance for BNB chain is managed on the Beacon chain, right? This is where all participants come together and decide on rules to follow, on maybe new features to implement for the BNB smart chain, or whatever the case may be that they want to introduce, right? So, and to be able to like ensure that there is value for participating in the governance process. So, tokens are introduced as a form of expression of ownership for those that participate in the process, right? And in very practical sense, explaining. Okay, yes, like I said, just keep dropping your questions in the comments. I'll get to all of those. I can see your questions as they come in, and this is real time. So I will get to all of your questions and answer them. So we have here at BNB Chain, we have economic processes in place to ensure, to guarantee that we do not get into, if you will, bankruptcy, where we are in a situation that the tokens that are used to identify as ownership for those operating in the governance scheme get to a point where it loses value, and then we are unable to support our infrastructure, right? So I am going to be sharing on BNB Greenfield by just showing you the demo page, because I don't see any other example that explains what we are trying to achieve with the BNB Greenfield. So it is practically a decentralized data and storage system, right? Think of your file storage system on your PC. So in every sense of the word security, having your files just stored on your PC does not really make the file safe, right? And I would explain. So the next best option would be to like batch up your files and upload them to a centralized repository, right? Where you can always, a centralized repository in the cloud, where you can always have access to it. So what then happens, just in the case of it not being safe, maybe you lose your local device, your computer, your drive, then what then happens if the infrastructure layer where you store that file possibly goes down, experiencing an attack and all of that? Well, some people might say that such storage environments always have distributed servers, right? But the challenge with that is such storage environments are not decentralized. So, and that is where Greenfield comes to solve that problems of your data being stored in a decentralized format. In the simplest of terms, what that means is that when you use BNB Greenfield, right? You can create store data, right? And then you have the extent of full ownership to the point that there is no failure in terms of the infrastructure that is used to store your data, and thus making it safe. So I would encourage you to visit the BNB Greenfield website, right? Um, I would put that information here in the comments as well. And then one of the simplest basic thing that you can do is go ahead and read our documentation. So we are almost at the end of today's session, right? And I want to say, keep bringing in your questions, whatever those questions are. I'm seeing someone asking, going as far as asking someone questions about smart contract security and asking about BNB data, right? Yes, I am going to answer all of those questions. Please keep those questions coming in. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of our components of our documentation, because we have really, really invested a lot into making sure that our documentation, it's really easy for developers to reference and then start building applications on BNB chain, right? And then I think the best way to go about this would be to walk you through a demo of our docs, right? So this is our developer portal, right? Where you come and find all sort of information about BNB chain, but specifically our docs, our docs live here, right? Where you can learn all about BNB chain, right? So, and this is where, so practically, if you take a look at our docs, This is where everything I have shared with you today in video format is reference form, right? You get to learn more about the Bitcoin chain. You get to learn about the BSC chain, and then you get to learn about the zero knowledge ecosystem, right? And then we have the FAQ session where you can get to learn more about BNB chain, right? And then we have an extensive resource that you can use to get up and get quickly started building, right? Um, get to learn all you can do with our in our ecosystem, and then get to start using our dApps, right? And more importantly, for a suite of tutorials, you can find all of those here, right? So please note that the Web3 Mastery Program, it's sort of like for a lack of time to use, a hand-holding program where we are with you through the entire process to make sure that we walk you through everything that you need to know, and then everything that you need to learn in a way where we can interact with you in real time, and then you get to like see all of that, right? And then for front end developers, we have what we call our ROPC nodes. It's you can think of our ROPC nodes like a set of APIs that you can start to ingest and then begin to immediately build on the BNB chain. So we are going to like take a look at all of this. So for those who want to move from Web 2 to Web 3, we have all of this for you. And then for those who want to learn more about Solidity, we also have all that you need to get to teach you Solidity. So yes, you can go to our docs. That is the URL there, docs.bnbchain.org/docs/overview. And then you can quickly get up to speed with everything that you want to learn. So that's it. We have come to the end of today's sessions, which also marks the end of our theoretical sessions, because from next week, we are going to be going hardcore into writing code, and it's going to start with setting up of the dev environment and the basic introduction to smart contracts. And we are going to be having a guest speaker for that session that I am really looking forward to, and it will be my pleasure to introduce that person. So thank you to everyone for being here so far on this session. And then that said, I am going to now start working through the questions. And yes, I think I'll just start from the bottom, right? Because this one, it's very fascinating. Soccer Focus, is that really your real name? Is asking, do we need a laptop to continue? Yes, please. So because from next week, our sessions will be live coding sessions. So it will be great if you can follow along. Oh, Chinwe, hi. So glad to have you here. Nice to have you here. Thank you so much for your kind words. Oh, Nico from Cameroon. Fatma. So glad to have you here, Fatma. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. And then straight into the questions. Vincent is asking, do testnet transactions get recorded on chain? So practically, we have infra for testnet data, and then we have infra for mainnet rate data. But before getting to explain things at infra level, I do want to understand what you mean by get recorded, right? Because when you are dealing with smart contracts, what we do, we have what we call events that are created with transactions, and those are emitted, right? So practically, because of how much it costs to like interact with the blockchain, right? So typically, smart contract data in the traditional sense of Web 2, where you have user data or user comments and have or you have a particular activities being logged, and then you have to like store that in the DB. It does not work like that in the Web3 sense, right? So that is why explorers exist, to be able to like see this data and review this data, right? So for explorers, we have the mainnet explorer, and then we have the testnet explorer. So I demoed both by first of all showing you the mainnet explorer, and then when I carried out transactions with the test BNB, then I showed you the text explorer. So that was not an actual mainnet explorer where I carried out that transaction that I carried out. So then Rachel is asking, oh, hi, Rachel. Good to have you here. How do they? And yeah, so guys, when I mention a particular name and I say hello, please don't feel awkward or feel out of place, right? I have had the pleasure of interacting with a lot of you, and then I am really very delighted to see you here, and I'll call out your names. And please, like I did mention, join the Telegram, and also you can always say hello on the Telegram. If you have any questions, you can also share that. So, Rachel, thank you for joining us. How do the different chains in the ecosystem interact with each other? Can I use the same address when interacting across all, like L2s? This is a very insightful question, right? Because it is practically forcing me to think about it myself, right? Because if you reference some centralized systems, right, you can actually have one address and then be able to use that address in that centralized system to like I don't want to mention names of centralized exchanges, and then use that one address from in a centralized exchange to like receive tokens from different EVM compatible addresses, right? So you have a central exchange A, and then you have blockchain B, blockchain C, blockchain C, right? And then with that one address on that central exchange A, you'll be able to like receive tokens from all of the addresses. So I really do not know how that works at the infrastructure layer, right? But I do believe that this is something I can ask my engineering team and then really get you the answer that you need, right? Because I really do not have that answer regarding using the same wallet address to interact across all. But regarding different chains interacting in the ecosystem, we typically have what we call bridges, right? Bridges make it possible for you to like carry out transactions cross chain. That means you can take a token, say from BNB, and send it to Ethereum, or you can take a token from Ethereum and send it to one of the other chains, which you know. So yes, that is what bridges are. And then for L2, layer twos typically exist to like increase transaction output, right? I really do not know if layer twos enable the ability to use one wallet across different chains, right? One wallet address across different chains. And I think to answer that question, well, we do. Okay, yeah. Yes, yes. I think infrastructure, speaking at the infrastructure level, right? Using a service like a custodial service like MetaMask, right? It typically gives you the one address that you can use to like carry out transactions across different chains? Yes, that answers that question. So you can have your MetaMask address, just that's one address, and then be able to use that address to interact with the BNB chain ecosystem and use that one address to be able to interact with the Ethereum ecosystem. So yeah, I guess that answers that question. But the thing about having that one address is that on a custodial wallet like MetaMask is that you would have to change network every time you want to interact with a particular contract in a particular ecosystem, right? You want to interact with the contract on BNB chain. That means you have to like change your address from whatever it is to BNB, change the network rather from whatever it is to BNB. So, and typically these networks are marked by different network IDs, right? So if you're interacting on the BNB mainnet, the network ID is 56, and then on the testnet, the network ID is 97. So that means when you want to like carry out the transaction on BNB mainnet, you have to like switch from 97 to 56. It's typically like tuning radio channels, right? On the same radio box, you cannot listen to two channels at the same time, right? and or maybe on a TV. On one TV, you cannot watch listen to two channels at the same time, right? But you have the TV. So think of your address like that. Yeah, I believe that that answers that questions. And then, like I said, L2 typically exists to like scale transactions output for those that are limited. So Kingsley is asking if I can drop more information on the EVM. So Kingsley, I am just going to assume that possibly you asked that question because of knowledge gaps that you may have. But if you can, give me more context in the comments because I would want to like answer to what it is that you're exactly asking. But I'm just going to speak practically on the EVM in a larger sense and go as basic as possible, right? So the EVM, it's an acronym, and then the long form definition, it's the Ethereum Virtual Machine, right? What that means is that it's a computer of itself, but it is virtual, right? Right now, I am having a conversation with you, and I have a computer in front of me, and I have an operating system installed on it, right? The computer can be like defined as a machine that turns the ones and zeros that the operating system translates to it, and then we're able to like have this message images translated in real time, and then you can have this interaction. So you have the machine, which is my computer, right? Now, for the Ethereum virtual machine, right? It's actually a piece of software, right? Like an operating system. So what then happens is that you can install that piece of software in your machine. So you set it up and it's running on your machine, right? But in the actual sense of it, you are not the only one that owns that machine because at the same time, for anybody else that is running that piece of software on their computer, right? They are part of the what we call the EVM network, right? They are practically part of the EVM. And each of those computers that is part of the EVM, it's called a node. So what then happens is that when you King's Exchange, right? Maybe you have the Ethereum virtual machine running on your computer, it's node A. Then I have the Ethereum virtual machine running on my computer is node B. So when you carry out a transaction from your computer. See, you want to send tokens or interact with the contract. Immediately you trigger that activity. Like I see it on my computer, but not as a copy, but as the same activity being triggered, right? So it is not a clone, so to speak. It is not a copy. It is the same machine that is like seeing all activities happening in real time. And that is why it is possible to have decentralized technology working and we are able to like have the same data available across all of these machines at the same time. So that is the EVM at the infrastructure level, and possibly, I hope that answers your question regarding how it operates. Um, so Ninja is asking, what is MetaMask? Why don't I use Binance? So Binance is a centralized exchange, right? So what that means is that typically the foundations of blockchain technology, it's based off on anonymity, right? And based off on decentralization. So in very practical terms, I want to have an infrastructure where I am able to carry out monetary transactions without being monitored, right? And then I can use a blockchain, and then I don't have to go through the hassles of setting up a KYC process, right? Where I would have to like go into a bank, fill out a form, and then be able to like send monies from one part of the world to another, right? So Binance, it serves as a centralized infrastructure where you can do KYC process, right? And then possibly you want to send money from one region of the world to another. You can then convert your fiat to token on Binance, right? And then be able to send it. But at that point in time, you are no longer anonymous because you have gone through a KYC process, and then Binance is a centralized entity, right? But for MetaMask enables us carry out transactions on blockchains, with BNB Chain being one of such blockchains, right? And then that means that I can just open a install MetaMask on my computer, have a wallet address, and then find a service where I can convert my local currency, which is fiat, to crypto, and then be able to like use my MetaMask address, which is living on BNB, to like carry out transactions. That is an example in the payment space. But another very important example is that Binance is used for like token exchange in terms of payments value exchange. But there are more things that you can do on blockchains, right? Which MetaMask enables. So you can interact with contracts where you have to like maybe prove identity, play games, submit medical records, do IoT tracking, right? And for all of these activities, you would need tokens in very like tokens to be able to track these activities and map these activities to an address. So that is where MetaMask come in. So you cannot like carry out all of those transactions with smart contracts on Binance, but you can do all of that on the blockchain using MetaMask. Hmm. So just for context, if you ask this question, I think I would have to like answer this on the Telegram because it's a very interesting one. I hope you are with us on there. Rachel has another question. Can one dApp utilize all the capabilities of different chains? I.e., can it be deployed across all? If so, how does it work? So this is a very brilliant question, right? So in very practical terms, at the infrastructure layer for blockchains, you have smart contracts, which I said are also called decentralized applications, and then you have the blockchain infrastructure. So smart contracts are typically business logic that are written and then deployed on blockchains, right? So you have to like first of all code a smart contract, and then you choose a blockchain to deploy it on. Like take for instance, a smart contract could be as something as simple as writing a business logic that says whenever anybody interacts with this piece of code, send them hello world, right? I could click a button and then a smart contract sends me hello world. Now that is a smart contract. That is a piece of code with logic, right? But when you take that piece of code with logic and put it on a blockchain like BNB chain, right? Then you are now then empowered to either use that piece of code to either send transactions or issue rewards and all of that. So regarding it being deployed, yes. So you can have that one piece of code that you have written, the programming language for EVM compatible chains, its Solidity, and then deploy that piece of logic across various chains that are EVM compatible, right? This ties into your question of bridges that you asked, of contracts being able to interact across different chains that you asked earlier on, where I mentioned the concept of bridges, where you would now have to like be able to like bridge transactions from one chain to another. So you can have that one piece of logic deployed across different chains. So that is why often enough you'll find different DeFi protocols. They are deployed on one chain, but they are not on the on deployed on another chain, right? And then they would have to like deploy and not an instance, deploy versions of their contract on those particular chain to be able to carry out activities on those particular chain. So when we get to talking about a couple of applications built on BNB in week 6, would see examples of that. So I am going to next question is from BME. Says, is it possible to be involved with governance via the smart chain or does one have to use both together for both governance and transaction? So I suppose this is asking about the difference between the Bitcoin chain and then the Binance smart chain, right? So in very practical sense, the Bitcoin chain exists as the layer where how best to put this, it exists as the layer where all governance for the BNB ecosystem happens, right? This is different from when you would say you build a governance protocol, like a decentralized autonomous organization, like a DAO, and then deploy it on the BNAS chain itself. And then you are now able to carry out governance activities in that DAO, such as staking and voting, right? So that is the core difference. So the Beacon chain, it's for governance for the entire BNB ecosystem, right? And then if you want to like use build a governance protocol on top of BNB, on top of BNB, then you would have to like do it. Then you would have to do it on the BNB smart chain. Um, That is asking about smart contract security. You know what? I think yes, I have made a note. We are going to have a session on smart contract security, and if that is something that you approve of, that we should have a special class on away from the Web3 mastery program. I would like to hear your thoughts on that, Dari. Again, to reiterate about smart contract security, if that is a class that, if that is a session that you want us to have a separate class on, I would want you to reiterate that in the comments, Dari. So, how can Chineye is asking, how can one get BNB data? So, I want to assume that you are asking this question from either the perspective of a data analyst or the perspective of a Web2 engineer, right? Because I figure for a Web2 engineer, why data would be important to you would be possibly you want to figure if we have some sort of set of APIs where you can read data and then be able to make sense of that data by building out UIs. Yeah. And then for a data analyst, you want to see where you can pull data from and then be able to like make a sense of that, right? So I am going to point you to our docs. I did mention that we have sorry, let me share that. We have a set of endpoints available that you can be able to like reference and then be able to like extract data depending on what you want and then be able to like use all of that, right? So I am quickly going to pull up our API docs and then point you to that so that we can use it as a point of reference, right? While I am, and then point you to that as a point of reference, right? So I am trying to like do multiple things at once, and hopefully be able to like point you to the right resource because this is I see how this could be important to developers, right? And then how because it could help you to start building immediately. So I am going to pull up that link and then drop it in the comments during the course of the call. So just be on the lookout for that, please. So yeah, thank you for that very important question, Victory. The difference between Greenfield and IPFS. So Greenfield it's offered by BNB Chain, while IPFS is offered by another blockchain infrastructure company. Yes, I am going to drop the link to the previous session on our Telegram channel. The links that I explored, yes, I am going to drop those in the Telegram channel. Yes. So, guys, I think I have gone through all of the questions. Thank you so much for everyone that stayed up to the end of the session. I hope you have learned something new today. And we are going to be having another session again next week. It will be a pleasure to have you join us. And for those that haven't joined our Telegram, please, I encourage you to come join our Telegram. So we are at BNB Africa Devs, right? So it's been a wonderful time this evening, and then we are going to be doing this again same time next week. So I'm just going to be watching your comments, and I want to see you. For those that stayed up with us to the end, please just again drop the locations that you are joining us from, and drop your comments again, drop your locations again where you are joining us from. And also, if you have learned something about the session, right? One of the things that we thrive on is feedback. And the only way we can see that feedback is when we're able to track it in public, right? So you can go on Twitter and then using the hashtag BNB Chain Africa, BNB Chain Africa, right? That is the hashtag. You can just share your experience with us on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And rest assured, I'll be tracking those comments on Twitter, on LinkedIn. And yes, guys, I do have to mention, I am going to be in a city close to you very soon, whether you are in East Africa or whether you're in South Africa or whether you're in West Africa, right? And so I want you to get accustomed to me having these conversations with you on video, because this is the same way I'm going to approach you in real life, and then we are going to be able to have conversations. So join the Telegram, ask your questions. It's a welcoming place, right? I am always there, whatever time of the day that your question comes in. And yes, you can do like Kingsley and then drop your country flag in the comment. Whatever questions that you may have, I am there on Telegram. I'll be answering your questions. And also, we are continuing this it's this session. So we have this is just day two, week two. So we have 4 weeks of learning left. Please make sure that you tune up for every class. And having said that, I want to say thank you so much from all of Africa. Thank you for joining us on this session. And then I look forward to seeing you same time next week. It's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. And oh, okay. Thank you, Dele. Thank you, Vincent. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Let's do this again next week. See you guys. Cheers. All the best. Bye.